Throughout gaming history, there have been countless characters that have been underutilized by the games they appear in. Characters that could be amazing to play as, either for the stories they could tell, the abilities they could use, or both, but never achieved that status for one reason or another. And then there's Dingodile, who just... why? I'm not upset by it, just very confused. But out of all these characters, there is one who I'd argue stands out among the rest. One whose character themes, abilities, her untapped potential could lead to so many excellent gameplay experiences if she was playable. But despite being around for over 30 years and having her series named after her, she never gets that chance at the spotlight unless everybody else gets it at the same time. I am speaking, of course, of Princess Zelda, a character who, above all others, I want to see get a starring role in a video game. Something that potentially may happen very soon? I hope? But until/if that day comes, I want to talk about why I think Zelda deserves the spotlight, and how awesome I think she'd be if she was given that role. To briefly define the goal of this video, I am not in any way, shape, or form trying to predict some playable Zelda element of the Breath of the Wild sequel. I'd be overjoyed if that ends up happening, but I'm not making this video as a form of speculation. And normally I'd also claim here that I'm not trying to start some kind of movement to get Zelda that role, but I kinda am here. Not out of a delusion that I think I have any kind of power over what happens at Nintendo, I definitely don't, but simply because the best way to make these sorts of things happen is to show interest in them. On top of that goal, I also believe that Zelda simply deserves to have a case made for her. She's a cool character with cool abilities, and I'll take any opportunity to have some fun brainstorming. And in terms of those opportunities, this is one of the best. Now, before I start making my case about Zelda's future role in this series, I want to talk about what it has been in the past. Because it's not like Zelda has had a small role in these games, they are named after her after all. Among other things, she has led a pirate crew across the high seas, become a well-trained ninja while multiclassing as a bard, her spirit was kicked out of her body, leading to her possessing a giant suit of armor to fight alongside Link. She is a literal demigod, except of course for that time when she was a full-blown deity. Now, Zelda's had some awesome roles throughout this series' long history. That's the primary reason I want to play as her. She has been consistently shown to have all these cool abilities, but her chances to actually showcase them are so few and far between. This is because Zelda has been relegated to a supporting role in the Zelda series. And the thing about supporting roles is that they support. Link is the protagonist here, so he obviously has to have the spotlight. He's the avatar for the player, so he's gotta do all the cool stuff. That's why saving Zelda in one form or another is usually the ultimate goal of these games, because saving someone is one of the most satisfying accomplishments a game can give Link, and by extension, the player. That in of itself normally wouldn't bother me. I'd still have this desire to see Zelda playable, but there wouldn't be anything special about that. It'd be cool to play as her in the same way it's cool to play as Virgil, cool to play as Luigi, King Dedede, the Arbiter. She'd just be another character that I enjoy seeing in that role. But with every game I play in this series, Zelda sharing playable status with Link has felt more and more necessary to me, because this series likes to reinforce the lore of the Triforce, power, wisdom, and courage, the three equal aspects that dictate the realm of Hyrule. These aspects are generally tied to three characters: Link to courage, Ganon to power, and Zelda to wisdom. But while these elements are generally advertised to be equal by the stories of these games, all three are powerful in their own ways, in terms of actual gameplay, wisdom always gets the short end of the stick. Link, as I've already stated, is the protagonist. Nobody is going to argue that these games don't treat Link well. And Ganon is arguably a more important character. The conflict in these games wouldn't exist without him. And this series does an excellent job showcasing his power and driving the player to want to defeat him. Compared to those titanic roles, Zelda just isn't on the same level. Still important, absolutely, a vital part of the stories she appears in, but these aren't just stories, they are video games. And as games, they could exist without her. This imbalance is further shown by how the trio is treated in spin-offs. Link, again, he's fine. No complaints there. I'd even argue he gets a little too much love. And there was no better way to make Ganondorf playable than putting him into Dynasty Warriors gameplay. That formula turns anyone into what Ganondorf should feel like to play. It's one of the best power fantasies out there. And even with his abysmal Smash moveset, it still manages to sell the theme of his character. What's Zelda got? There's Hyrule Warriors, where again, she's Ganondorf. Smash had to give her Link spells because she doesn't get to do enough on her own to make a moveset out of. And the few times she does get an equal role are times where her and Link play basically the same. It just doesn't feel fair to me, and I want that to change, especially after Hyrule Warriors. That game let Ganondorf absolutely shine while still feeling like it fit within the Zelda gameplay formula. Third-person camera, locking on, using items, that sort of thing. I want to see Zelda get that same kind of treatment. For her to either receive a spin-off where her wisdom gets to shine with that gameplay formula, or to star alongside Link, differentiating the two with playstyles that suit their strongest traits. I'm going to be focusing on that second possibility here, because while some kind of simulation, puzzle, or strategy spin-off starring Zelda would fit this bill, the idea of her being a separate character alongside Link, tackling problems in her own way sounds much more interesting to me. Be it a co-op experience or an Assassin's Creed style pick one or the other kind of deal. That, in turn, poses a series of questions, the major one being, what gameplay elements reinforce wisdom? Which is actually a little difficult to answer given the nebulous definition that wisdom has, and how closely it relates to intelligence. Wise and smart are often interchangeable in a sentence. I'm not gonna go off on a philosophy tangent trying to define what it really means, as I find those conversations to be a bit obnoxious. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be favoring the role-playing definition of wisdom, perception and insight and all that, but ultimately I'll be treating intelligence and cleverness like they're also fitting my goals. Which, yes, is cheating a bit, but so long as the game has a narrative that supported wisdom overall, I'm okay with it. Where Link follows his heart, Zelda uses her head. That's the gist of what I'm going for here. Which actually gives a good groundwork to build off of, as Zelda games already have some elements that embody this. Oftentimes, solving a puzzle, defeating an enemy, or simply progressing through an environment requires players to be perceptive of their surroundings and understand how all the tools they possess work in tandem with each other. Breath of the Wild especially provides a playground for players to apply the tools they are given in various creative ways, encouraging and rewarding players that take the time to truly understand how this game works. That kind of gameplay, this guided path of creativity, is what I would want to be highlighted and enhanced in how Zelda would play compared to Link. Here's a basic example of what I mean from the start of Breath of the Wild, a combat encounter. There's a handful of bokoblins chilling inside a giant skull. A lamp is hanging in one of the skull's eyes, and there's some explosive barrels inside. If a player notices all these objects, they can shoot the lamp down and blow up the barrels for an easy fight. But this isn't required. Link can just as easily fight them head-on and still win. That is where I would want to draw the line with Zelda. A hypothetical playable Zelda would need to notice the lamp and the barrels, to connect those dots and exploit that weakness, as fighting the bokoblins head-on would be significantly more dangerous for her. Still possible, but it's not where her specialty lies, as she doesn't have the same abilities that Link does. Some offhand examples, perhaps she has to remain stationary for many of her attacks, making her vulnerable while using them. Or maybe she can't dodge and block very well. The only reliable way for her to avoid damage is with some kind of parrying system. But if that system is mastered and her abilities are used properly, she does more damage overall. I don't want her to go full-on glass cannon, just be a little more cumbersome if she oversteps and gets overwhelmed. Which of course would encourage a more railroaded experience that might not appeal to everyone, but that's the beauty of this idea. If it doesn't sound fun, Link could still be available as a more traditional playable character instead. Another way to differentiate Zelda from Link would be to simply give her more tools to interact with the environment than him. Where Link had 4 basic runes in Breath of the Wild, Zelda would have 8 or something that she could use to greater effect, giving her more creative freedom. An area that the Breath of the Wild Zelda in particular has a perfect skill set for. Unlike the Zeldas of previous games, this incarnation struggles with the holy magic the character is known for, but she is very knowledgeable when it comes to the crazy guardian technology of this era, something that's kind of embodied in how she plays in Age of Calamity. That could open up a cornucopia of different abilities and items that Zelda could use as she learned more about this technology. Engineering gadgets, unlocking runes, scavenging equipment, all of which could open the door for more ways to have these kinds of experiences. An easy example involves the Guardians, specifically their legs. Breath of the Wild is a game of constant climbing, and while Zelda may not possess the unending stamina of Link, she does know a thing or two about the spider-like Guardians. If it was required of her, I could see her taking off their limbs, making a climbing backpack out of them, and voila! Not only would she not have to worry about stamina, as she wouldn't be exerting herself, she'd have her hands free and be able to use all her abilities on any surface. This would massively open up potential design for combat encounters and puzzles, as the solutions to both could now partially rely on positioning, finding the right angle to start an attack, or simply getting somewhere enemies can't reach Zelda so she can pick them off. It would also allow for more enclosed areas, caves and large buildings that she can fully traverse far easier than Link ever could. That, in turn, would allow for new enemy designs that can climb after Zelda. Gohmas are an easy example, adding more and more layers to these encounters. Plus, there's all sorts of cool attachments those arms could have. I can easily imagine each of them working as a claw shot. To reiterate, the idea I'm trying to reinforce here is that this would be a game designed to test a Zelda player's understanding of the environment, and how the tools they have can be used to shift it to their advantage. It would have a very different flow to gameplay than Breath of the Wild, requiring Zelda to scope out encounters from a distance, take her time, make a plan. Which brings me to two more mechanics that I want to see here: resource management and stealth. Both are gameplay elements that I would argue act to encourage wise decisions, and are also things that Breath of the Wild showcases. And like I stated earlier, where Link can choose to work with or ignore those elements, they would be borderline required for Zelda. If she was caught unawares or misused resources, she would be in serious trouble. But to balance that, she has significantly more to work with in both areas. Which brings me to traps. Setting up and leading enemies into traps is a fantastic way to encourage using one's environment. It enhances stealth gameplay and resource management, and ultimately creates a fantastic feeling of outwitting one's opponents. I'll use the bomb rune for this particular example. While its uses are near endless in Breath of the Wild, Link is very limited in how he creates these things, summoning and detonating them one at a time, and he's very noticeable while doing so. Zelda, on the other hand, would be able to go crazy here. Instead of one, she could deploy several to detonate whenever she pleases, and these would not be bombs, they would be guidable 𝒑𝒏𝒄𝒆𝒔𝒔. That would give an incredibly powerful tool with which she could control encounters, preemptively setting up traps to bamboozle enemies or prevent them from reaching her, and all from a safe hiding place. Those could pair very well with some beetle-like drones to distract enemies, lead a moblin towards a cliff face where a waiting 𒒑𝒐𝒏𝒄𝒆𝒔𝒑 will explode and knock it to its demise, attach bananas to them to create a conga line of Yiga Blade Masters, or just cut out the middleman and attach bombs to these two. That works as well. Another tool that could combo very well with these sorts of distractions could be a Guardian Laser. This weapon is extremely powerful in Breath of the Wild, but takes a long time to charge and is very loud. Zelda could use a modified version of this as some kind of gun or arm cannon, killing almost anything in a single shot, but she'd have to be very careful with it, only using it in situations where enemies could not harm her mid-charge, as she'd be a sitting duck. This allows these pieces to start falling into place. Puzzles can be formed where Zelda needs to figure out how to take care of smaller enemies so they won't stop her from deleting the largest threat. And to tie it all back into the resource management thing, all of this could be fueled with some kind of Guardian energy meter, which would dictate how Zelda would be able to approach these encounters while also serving as an easy thing to upgrade via progression. To fully flesh all of this out, I want to propose one more example, an encounter where the abilities I have mentioned would come into play. This is a basic fortress, with a troop of moblins and bokoblins patrolling around a fort. The bokoblins have bows, and a guardian sentry turret is raised up in the middle. The turret is extremely dangerous for Zelda. Disregarding its weapon, if it alerts the enemies to her presence, she'd probably have to run. So the goal of this encounter is clear: deal with every enemy without the turret detecting Zelda. With its raised position, the turret has a fairly wide view of the area, so Zelda approaching herself would be very difficult. But the area is also surrounded by tall grass, which the 𝒂𝒏𝒄𝒆💏 are just small enough to move through undetected. By exploiting this, Zelda can get a 𝒂𝒏𝒄𝒆💏 near every enemy, which she has just enough energy to do and still be able to fire her weapon. Once they are all in place, she can detonate them at will, which I picture working like Wind Waker's boomerang, targeting several and releasing. The explosions will kill the bokoblin archers and at least incapacitate the moblins, buying Zelda the time to lock onto the turret and fire with her own weapon safely. It will notice her eventually and start firing back, but since Zelda got the jump on it, she'll shoot first, instantly destroying it. From that point, it's a simple matter of exploiting terrain to kite and pick off the moblins, then secure any loot inside. That is how I would want every combat encounter to function. Everything is a puzzle, down to the smallest encounters, with various aspects of the environment presenting different solutions to achieve victory. In that example, I only mentioned a Guardian Laser and the 𝒂𝒂𝒏𝒄𝒆💏, but say Zelda had a way to hack and control the Guardian turrets by this point in the game. That would present an entirely different solution, and offers up further depths to the puzzle, as maybe there's something blocking her from doing that Zelda would need to take care of first. I'd want Zelda to have a wide array of these tools, all of which would need to be combined in various ways to achieve victory. Before I end off the concept, I have one more somewhat unrelated idea that I feel would work really well with the wisdom and cleverness theme when combined with this style of combat. I would love for there to be some kind of Grand Theft Auto wanted system that Zelda has to deal with. Say Zelda tried to take on that turret encounter but was noticed and had to flee. She could simply hide, wait for things to calm down and try again, but that might not be the wisest decision, because in the time it would take for things to settle, an alert would have gone out, and a powerful enemy would be on the way. I want there to be some kind of SAX, Xenomorph, Mr. X level of enemy, a near unstoppable, constant threat that Zelda would need to take into account, always posing the question of if it would be wise to initiate combat, if she has the resources to deal with that threat should it arrive. And I want that enemy to be Link. It'd be why there's a choice of playing as one or the other, because one would have to save the other after they get possessed by some glowy spooky hand maybe. I don't know, I'm just throwing out ideas here. It would be a fantastic way of showing off both characters' strengths and weaknesses, by being able to both play as and against them. When Zelda has to deal with Link, she'd be faced with a relentless, resourceful opponent, requiring heavy preparation and every tool in her arsenal to keep him at bay. He'd still have all the crazy abilities from Breath of the Wild, and he'd use all of it. But that might be preferred over having their roles reversed. If Link was the player character, he would have to be that relentless to hunt Zelda down, to even stand a chance at stopping her. She would create obstacles in his path, tip enemies off to his position, rig chests to explode, fire lasers from great distances, which could result in the most stressful long-distance dead man's volley the series has ever seen. She would never fully engage herself unless there was no risk to do so or she absolutely had to, because that would be the wise thing to do. I think I could talk about this forever, discussing different potential tools that Zelda could have and the situations they could be used, what enemies they'd be effective against and which could cancel them out, requiring other tools in turn, all the crazy scenarios that this could all be tied together into. And this is just my take on the Breath of the Wild Zelda. That's not the only direction that she could be taken, and past her, the character has had so many alter egos and incarnations with radically different skill sets. But I feel like I've established enough of a groundwork to explain why I want this so badly. Forget how much she deserves it. Zelda being playable in her series and being designed to play to her strengths could offer up an experience that hasn't been seen since Metal Gear died. A marriage of action-adventure and puzzle gameplay, with Link designed to favor the former and Zelda favoring the latter. Using the reflex-based combat system of the Zelda series but requiring players to plan out their actions first, to solve an encounter before engaging with it, to force players to acknowledge their limits, know when to fight or run, consider if the risk is worth the reward. I will argue that that requires wisdom. That kind of game is something that I am dying to play, and I truly believe that Princess Zelda is the best character to make it happen. As it says in the title, this is a remake of an old video I made a while back. I've been redoing all of my content recently to get a standardized level of quality on the channel and take a healthier, more professional approach to the website. And this was probably the remake I was most hesitant to make. I wanted to change my presentation style, but the original is my most popular video by far. And apart from a few things I wanted to word better for clarification, there wasn't anything about the original concept that I had a problem with. But that hesitancy quickly faded once I started. This is still my favorite idea I've made, and it was just fun to talk about more. The biggest reason I love the idea of Playable Zelda is that there's so many ways that she could star in that role. So in the interest of pushing the engagement of this video up, and just having fun discussions, what would be the coolest way for that to happen for all of you? Would it feature one of her alter egos? An alternate telling of Ocarina of Time from Sheik's perspective? Or a Wind Waker prequel starring Tetra? Does the possibility of a dedicated spin-off sound more interesting? Some kind of Advanced Wars clone, or a simulation game perhaps? Hyrule Reconstruction Tycoon? Whatever ideas you all may have, please share them in the comments below. If you all enjoy my brainstorming sessions, please consider liking, subscribing, and clicking that notification bell. For any that really liked it, consider joining the channel. I don't run ads on my videos, as they are annoying and mess with the flow of my content, so any support would be quite helpful. Otherwise, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all soon with another video. Goodbye.